Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us live or catching the replay. I'm Ariel Vaughn, I'm the Millennial Coach and Client Supervisor with MSBCoach, and this month we are talking about critical thinking, and today I have with me Adrian Felts. He is the Program Manager of Signature Science. Thank you so much for being here, Adrian.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, so will you just tell everyone a little bit more about yourself and your role right now?
Sure, so I'm currently a program manager with Signature Science, like you said. I've got a history of working for research and development companies, typically in the areas of science and technology, and around biology, chemistry, and engineering. Do a little bit of software engineering projects as well. Been doing that since 2000, and also do some consulting with MSBCoach, as well as with another small consulting firm around project management, proposal, and business development. And that company's called Centrity.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you again for being here. And
Sure.
yeah, it sounds like you're definitely going to give us lots of insight on critical thinking today.
I will try my best.
So just to start, how would you define critical thinking?
So I was thinking about this, and as we were saying before we started, it's not something I really put a definition to, even though I've talked about it before. But you've forced my hand to put a definition to it, so I've come up with a couple of thoughts. But primarily, the way I think about it is it's the ability to analyze a topic area, an issue, a problem, something you want to solve in a diverse and non-biased way to create solutions from multiple potential angles. So really, and it's really, I think, time conducive too. If a lot of times you have to make a very quick decision, you don't have a lot of time to put into it. But when that happens, you use your history, you use your historical way of answering something that you've had to answer in the past, and apply that. But I think mainly it's coming up with a decision or a solution to a problem without being biased, without having a preconceived notion of what the answer should be.
Yeah, that's always a little bit harder than said.
Yeah.
That was a good definition, but it's hard to practice sometimes. So why is critical thinking important as a leader?
Well, I think from the perspective of leading a team of people with a diverse background, you want to be able to, I think from different perspectives, and to be open to hearing other people's perspectives instead of having, like I said, a preconceived notion of how something should be answered. Plus, I think being a good leader, you need to be able to. We talked about active listening. I think that goes into being a good critical thinker too, because if you already have in your head what you think somebody should be saying and they're not saying it, you wait until they say it and then you jump on it. So I think from a leadership perspective, it starts with active listening, and then being able to kind of break down what you're hearing, and in a non-biased way, give your impression of that, your direction to the people that you're leading, whether they agree or not. And having some confidence to what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. I love that you bring up active listening as part of critical thinking, because that's not really, to me, that's not something I would have thought about initially, because critical thinking, you kind of think about your own thoughts at first, but really listening to others, that's a huge part of it. And I feel like everything in leadership that we talk about usually comes back to communication and listening to others and moving forward from that.
Yeah, well, I have the opportunity to work with students from time to time with the Virginia Piedmont Regional Science Fair. I'm the director and been doing that for a while. And that's gotten me involved in some things with the local community college and with going out and talking to students about getting a job and going to an interview. And one of the things that I try to impress upon them is active listening. And not thinking what you're going to say next to a question you haven't heard yet, but listen to what the interviewer or listen to what the person that you're talking to is saying, and craft your response around what they're currently talking to you about, not what you want to answer next. Maintain eye contact, a lot of those aspects. I do it with my kids too. You got eye contact, firm handshake. respond to what they're asking, not to what you want to hear.
Right, the basics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or it should be the basics anyway.
Yeah.
So share an experience with me when critical thinking has really impacted you.
Oh, let's see. So, I think I've got two examples of one positive and one negative.
Awesome.
A positive choice really was in kind of the evolution of my career, I guess. I graduated from college, not really knowing what I wanted to do. I liked science, so I studied science.
Mm-hmm.
I got a job in a lab because I liked working in a lab. When that lab failed, and the business model failed and all the investors pulled out, I really kind of jumped to the next thing that seemed kind of interesting. I really didn't have a plan.
Yeah.
When that job started, I was a biologist working for a company that was a non-laboratory job. I really liked the topic area. It was in the area of biosecurity and national defense, and that really seemed to have an impact on what our warfighters were doing. It had an impact on what our national security, helping to protect national security, started to have opportunities to be a program manager, which is how I really became interested in managing projects that were outside of my area of technical expertise. I did that for a long time for that company. It moved me here to Charlottesville. I've been here since 2005. I worked for that company until 2015. And really the critical thinking aspect of it really came along when I was really trying to figure out what did I want to do, and I had to look at my next career move as I was getting into my 40s and kind of what's next. Do I want to stay in this line of work, or what was really the thing that was not satisfying me?
Yeah.
And it really came down to not the mission of the work that I was doing, but really kind of the environment that I was in. So I had an opportunity to change that environment, and I took that opportunity and tried some things on my own around the areas of project management, and came up with a written plan for breaking down what I liked about the job, breaking down what satisfied me about the work that I do, and I was really kind of able to holistically look at what drove me, and then I put a lot of my time into a new consulting opportunity, which turned into the job that I have now, which is in the same line of work. With a different company in a very different, more positive work environment, doing things for national security that I think are important.
Yeah.
So that was a positive thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that story is, of course it was about your making a decision about your career, but it just shows that critical thinking is really utilized in all aspects of our life. It's not just you use critical thinking skills at work, but you also use critical thinking skills in your life to help make choices and determine where your life's going to go, and that had a really strong impact on where your life is.
I really think it's something that evolves with your history as a human being and as a thinker.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how we were talking before the tape started rolling, I guess.
Behind the scenes.
Yeah, about just about. I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about before that?
About critical thinking and how it affects all aspects of your life.
Yeah. So just the aspect that you're looking at things that you may not have a very strong technical background. Like I think the example I was giving is I'm managing a software engineering project right now. I am not a software engineer. I hired the people that know how to do software engineering, and you give them the problem and enough rope to hang themselves, and then you get away and say, you guys go do great work, and then when they need to be, aimed back at the problem, you guide them back to away from the shiny object,
right.
if that's where they're going. So I don't necessarily think I think you can apply critical thinking to lots of different aspects of your experience, your life experiences.
Definitely. Now let's kind of talk about that for a moment with managing people, especially when they're have knowledge in a field that you don't, like software. How do you encourage them to use critical thinking, or how do you kind of guide them to use critical thinking in their process, even though you guys are kind of talking two different languages sometimes?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I and my customer, we know what the problem is. We know what we want them to solve. Mm-hmm. But when the lingo starts, you need a glossary to understand a lot of the terminology that they use. But basically, it's that really encouraging them to say, okay, hey, we're going to get you guys in a room, and now you're going to critically think about how to solve this problem. It's more from well, go back to what I had said about getting the right people and getting out of the way. Mm-hmm. But also allowing them to dissect the problem. I think from a software engineering standpoint, you get a really good software engineer, they know how to dissect a problem. Right. I like to look at it as a program manager from the area of a work breakdown structure, where you have a product at the very high end, and then you break it all down into its bits and pieces, and then you address how am I going to answer each of these little bits and pieces. Mm-hmm. If you're building a bicycle, you've got your bits and pieces are the pedals and the reflectors and the spokes and even you can break that down into even smaller parts.
Right.
Where do you go to find those bits and pieces? Are you buying them from somewhere else? Mm-hmm. Are you making them on your own? And you can kind of look at a project or a problem that way as if it's its own project.
Yeah.
And apply critical thinking, to how you're going to answer each of those little bits and pieces.
Right. Yeah. And so, is there a time that where you don't really need critical thinking, or that critical thinking can be overthinking? Like with the bicycle example, yeah. I'm like, oh wow, that's a lot to think about the different parts and stuff. I'm just I'll just buy it and make it easy. So when do you kind of figure out when critical thinking is necessary, or when you've broken it down?
Well, I think time is, not everybody has enough time to sit there and really think hard about how they're going to answer a problem mm-hmm. in every different angle. Right. You've got, it's important sometimes not to make a knee-jerk reaction, because if you do, then then you may not have thought through, or you may not be ready for the ramifications of having said something just out of the blue. Mm-hmm. I can think of a lot of examples in our current political environment where making your knee-jerk reaction may be a problem. But in certain cases, though, as a leader, you need to make quick decisions in some cases. Mm-hmm. I think proven leaders and leaders who have been doing it for a while will pull from their historical knowledge, their own knowledge base of how I answered this problem in the past. Did it work out? A lot of that happens pretty quickly. Right. And I think some of it comes down to common sense. Yeah. There's just how we are as human beings. If you need to answer a question very quickly, there are certain things you learn when you're a teenager that you're probably not answering that the question the same way when you get into your 20s and 30s. So that's common sense, I think, is part of that as well as your historical knowledge. Right, definitely.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you had a negative critical thinking experience too.
Yeah, and this was, of course, it wasn't my negative, my critical thinking.
Something you witnessed.
It had an effect on me and the people that I worked with.
Yeah.
And what basically had happened, there was a project that was a lot of my examples are project-based examples, because that's where I spent a lot of my time thinking. But it was something that was being managed at a very high level within the company that I worked at before. Some of the decisions that had been made were, I talked about, not having preconceived notions or being biased towards how you think something should go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that high level solution was already a notion in somebody's mind. Like, this is how we're going to solve this problem.
Yeah.
And the folks that were involved in trying to solve it were not given the opportunity to come up with other ways to solve it. So they were forced into a channel that did not financially work out, and it did not technically work out. It got to the point where there were trust issues. There were people throwing each other under the bus because they didn't want to be seen as the person that broke something.
Right.
And I think it created a culture around that very big project that had the people running it allowed their team to think critically. Mm-hmm. Had they thought critically themselves, I think they would have been more prepared to look at the problem from a more holistic way of solving it than, hey, this is the answer, and you're gonna make this be the answer.
Right.
It wound up being a very costly, not just financially, but to the team that was involved as well. They were very dysfunctional after that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's such a great example because, as leaders and stuff, you're always having to make decisions, and, it could always be the right or wrong one we have to stick with, but, to start off with not even listening to other people and having this notion in your head that, like, this is how it's going to run, and, like, not even thinking about the consequences, that's when you really can see that ripple effect. And I'm sure that happens all the time with companies and organizations that just aren't aware of other things going on. So that's a good example.
Yeah.
So how would you encourage, or what would you recommend to people that want to, like, work on their critical thinking skills?
Well, I would. I wrote down a couple of thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Of course, I would say get a coach.
Yes.
Of course, being where we're sitting right now, say get a coach. Well, and that's not practical for everybody. But there are lots of good things out on the interwebs that can, for just reading material in general. Get a good sense of how your own historical experience or your own past experiences have allowed you to think yourself out of a problem. What are the types of environments that you like to be in, and where do you do your best thinking? I mean, I don't consider myself a great thinker, but I know that I also don't like to sit in a room with nothing going on and try to think through a problem. I'm always doing something else when I'm thinking through those things. And it took me a long time to kind of figure out what my optimal environment was. And that kind of comes down to just, I would tell people to practice. I mean, take decisions you've made in the past, break them down, how have you made them, and practice that process again through everyday things. Everything from you're cooking dinner. Think about how you break that process down.
Yeah.
And you can apply that to problem solving in your office environment, whether you've got an issue on a team or whether you're walking through a protocol for how you welcome visitors into your office. Those are things that I would tell people to really kind of think about how you make decisions.
Right. Yeah. So kind of start small and practice, and lots of self-reflection too.
Yeah.
Think about what works for you.
And there's kind of there's the choose your own adventure aspect of it. It's like, if I make this decision, I'm going to go this way, and if I make this decision, I'm going to go a completely different way. But I may wind up at the same solution.
Right.
Which decision could be the best one? Maybe they're both good.
Right.
Maybe one costs a little bit more, takes a little bit longer. but sometimes I look at things from a, that choose your own adventure aspect.
Yeah, I like that because then it's, you kind of are picking which path to take and see which path looks better, and that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
For sure. And so you did bring up coaching, so I'll ask you a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
Why do you say that a coach would be helpful?
Oh, I think a coach it's having one for the little bit of time that I was able to really help me think about how I address people within my management chain, and learning how to approach different behaviors, maybe behaviors that I'm not familiar with, or an office culture that I'm not familiar with, and not that it's wrong, but maybe I need to approach it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of that came down to the active listening and to my ability to think differently, and not approach something the way I think it should be approached, but by how others who have been given the trust by a company to make decisions are doing it. There's a reason. It's not just to make me mad. I think that having the opportunity to sit down and talk with a coach was good for understanding the environments that I was in and how I was reacting to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having a coach can definitely help you answer those questions, to help you think critically for yourself and kind of see different perspectives, and gives you that opportunity to really open up and kind of go through that choose your own adventure. You know?
You learn a lot about yourself and things that you may not have thought about before.
Mm-hmm. So any other thoughts on critical thinking that you would like to share?
I just think it's a life experience. You're gonna evolve. Your ability to think critically evolves as you get more experiences under your belt.
Mm-hmm.
When you guys had asked me to participate in this, I hadn't really thought about it like that before. I'd read a bunch of you read a lot and you experience it on your own, but when you really start to think about how what does it mean, I think it's just like I said before, you're not answering questions now the same way you would have before.
Yeah.
And it's because you learn from your experiences, and I think that just has a big impact on how you evolve as a person, as a leader, and as a partner on teams, or as a partner in life experiences.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your insight on critical thinking and your good and bad experiences with us today.
Sure.
Thank you everyone for watching us live or catching us on the replay. Please leave us some comments about your thoughts on critical thinking, or if you have any questions, we'll get back to you with the answers. And if you are interested in learning more about our coaching or training partnerships, you can visit our website, MSBCoach.com, or shoot us an email, info@MSBcoach.com. And next month, we will be back for another Facebook Live discussion. See you then.